Fort Smith, Arkansas, summer 1884. Saturday night in a saloon packed with cowboys, outlaws, and witnesses. Bass Reeves, 46 years old, sits alone at a corner table playing solitaire. The only black deputy U.S. Marshal in Indian Territory, his reputation precedes him. Over 3,000 arrests in 9 years. 14 men killed in self-defense, never wounded. Then Bob Dozier walks in, wanted for double murder, $500 bounty on his head, drunk and armed. The crowd goes silent. Everyone knows what's about to happen. Dozier walks over, calls Reeves a racial slur, challenges his authority. Reeves ignores him, continues his card game, silver Marshal badge visible on his vest. Dozier slaps him across the face. Open palm, sound echoes through the room. The badge falls off, hits the wooden floor with a metallic clang. Reeves picks it up slowly, stands, says nothing. Walks out without touching Dozier. Why did the deadliest lawman in the West walk away from public humiliation? What he did over the next 48 hours made sure Dozier never walked right again. Bass Reeves was born enslaved in Arkansas in 1838, escaped to Indian Territory during the Civil War, and lived with Creek and Seminole tribes for years. Learned their languages, their tracking methods, their ways of reading the land. In 1875, Judge Isaac Parker appointed him Deputy U.S. Marshal for the Western District of Arkansas, a 75,000 square mile territory that would become Oklahoma. The appointment was revolutionary, a black man given federal authority in the post-Civil War South, but Reeves earned it through results. By 1884, his reputation was ironclad. Master of disguise, fluent in multiple native languages, relentless tracker who brought outlaws back alive when possible. He believed in the law, not revenge. His silver Marshal badge, worn on a leather wallet pinned to his vest, represented something bigger than personal pride. It was federal authority in a lawless territory where outlaws hid in dense forests, where jurisdiction overlapped tribal nations, where violence was currency. That badge meant you couldn't hide forever. Outlaws feared Reeves more than Judge Parker's gallows, because the gallows meant it was over. Reeves meant it was inevitable. The incident happened on a Saturday evening in June 1884. Reeves had been tracking Bob Dozier for 3 weeks, a homesteader and his wife murdered over a land dispute, 2 witnesses, warrant issued, $500 bounty posted. Dozier was hiding somewhere in Choctaw Nation, but Reeves knew he'd surface eventually. Criminals always needed supplies, whiskey, information. So Reeves waited in Fort Smith saloons, listening, watching, blending in. He entered the saloon that night unarmed except for his badge. Part of his strategy, make himself less threatening. Gather intelligence without spooking anyone. Dozier walked in at sunset, drunk, loud, flanked by 3 armed men from his gang outside. He recognized Reeves immediately. Everyone knew what the Black Marshal looked like. The wanted posters described him. The stories spread faster than telegraph lines. The room went silent. 40 people inside, women and children in the adjacent hotel, civilians everywhere. Dozier walked over, stood too close, started talking, called Reeves that word, challenged whether a black man had any real authority. Reeves kept playing cards. Then Dozier slapped him, hard, deliberate, public. The badge clattered to the floor. Reeves picked it up, looked at Dozier once, walked out. The whispers started immediately. Reeves backed down. Badge means nothing if he won't fight. Reeves rode straight to Judge Parker's courthouse that night, the building locals called Hell on the Border. Parker's court was known as the Court of the Damned, and by 1884, Parker had sentenced 79 men to hang. His jurisdiction covered the most violent territory in America, and he ran it with absolute discipline. Reeves explained what happened. He could have arrested Dozier in the saloon, but Dozier's gang was outside, armed and waiting. A shootout would have killed civilians, women, children, innocent people caught in the crossfire. Reeves had a code: never risk innocent lives for pride. Parker understood, but he also understood optics. The territory is watching, he said. They need to see the badge still means something. Reeves studied Dozier's warrant file that night: murder, known associates, suspected hideouts in Choctaw Nation. But Reeves wasn't planning a standard arrest. He was planning a lesson. Dozier had challenged federal authority in front of 40 witnesses. That couldn't stand. But more than that, Dozier had challenged what the badge represented, the idea that law applied equally, that a black marshal's authority was real. Reeves needed Dozier to understand what happened when you tested that. Not just understand intellectually, understand in his bones, in his body, in a way he'd remember every day for the rest of his life. Over the next 2 days, Reeves tracked Dozier's movements with the precision that made him legendary. He followed at a distance, watching patterns, noting routines. Dozier's gang had a camp in Choctaw Nation, 15 miles from Fort Smith, hidden in thick woods near a creek. They thought they were safe there, outside immediate jurisdiction, protected by terrain and distance. But Reeves knew that territory better than they did. He'd lived with the tribes, learned from the best trackers in North America. He discovered Dozier's pattern. Every morning at dawn, Dozier left camp alone to check his trap line. Rabbit snares, beaver traps, game that supplemented their supplies. The morning routine took him along a specific path through the woods, always the same route, always alone. That was the vulnerability. Meanwhile, Dozier was bragging. He hit 3 different saloons over those 2 days, telling the story louder each time. I slapped Bass Reeves, the famous Negro Marshal, and he walked away like a coward. Other outlaws listened. Some laughed. Some started questioning whether Reeves's reputation was earned or exaggerated. The story spread through the territory. Every criminal, every fugitive, every man with a warrant heard it. Reeves's authority was being tested in real time. But Reeves wasn't hunting to arrest Dozier. He was hunting to teach everyone watching what disrespecting the badge actually cost. Reeves's next move was pure strategy. He disguised himself. This was his signature method. Never approach as yourself, always become someone else first. He dressed as an old farmer, hunched his back, dirtied his clothes, carried a walking stick. He got close enough to Dozier's camp to observe for a full day, watching from a position downwind where they couldn't smell him, hidden in brush where movement wouldn't catch attention. He counted 3 men in camp besides Dozier, all armed, all paranoid, all expecting Reeves to come eventually. They'd built the camp defensively, clear sight lines, backs to the creek, rifles always within reach. They were prepared for a shootout, but they weren't prepared for what Reeves was actually planning. He watched Dozier leave at dawn to check traps, noted exactly which path he took, how long he stayed out. When he returned, the trap line ran along a deer trail, packed earth, easy walking, predictable route. Dozier never varied it. That was the weakness. Routine becomes vulnerability when someone's watching. Reeves spent that day identifying the perfect spot, a narrow section of trail between 2 oak trees, ground soft enough to dig, cover thick enough to hide his work. That night, after Dozier returned to camp, Reeves moved in. He wasn't setting a trap to kill. He was setting a trap to cripple, to teach, to make permanent what words couldn't convey. What Reeves built wasn't a standard bear trap. Those would sever, amputate, kill through blood loss. He modified a design he'd learned from Choctaw hunters, a trap that closed on both legs simultaneously, designed to shatter bone without severing major arteries, meant to immobilize prey without killing it. He dug it into the trail at the exact spot Dozier's stride would hit, covered it with leaves and loose dirt, made it invisible. The trigger mechanism was simple. Pressure activated, spring-loaded, inevitable. Reeves knew the physics. Dozier was a big man, heavy step, predictable gait. The trap would close on both knees at once, designed specifically for that joint where bone meets bone, where shattered kneecaps mean you never walk normal again. This was justice learned from Native American traditions. Permanent consequences without death. Transformation of the body as reminder of transgression. Reeves finished the work by midnight, covered his tracks, moved back to his observation position. Then he waited. People close to Reeves would later say he spent those 2 days thinking about what the badge meant, not to him personally, but to everyone watching. Indian Territory in the 1880s had the highest crime rate in America. Outlaws fled there because jurisdiction was complicated, because federal authority was limited, because they thought they could disappear. The badge was the only thing keeping that territory from complete chaos. If criminals believed they could challenge it publicly and face no consequences, the whole system collapsed. Reeves wasn't defending his pride. He was defending the concept that law still mattered on the frontier. On the third morning after the Saloon incident, Dozier followed his routine. Dawn broke over Choctaw Nation, summer heat already rising, cicadas starting their rhythm, morning birds calling. Dozier left camp alone, rifle slung over his shoulder, walking his trap line like he had every morning for weeks. He checked the first 3 traps. Nothing. Nothing. 1 rabbit. He reset them, moved along the deer trail, thinking about nothing except breakfast and whiskey. His step hit the trigger mechanism at exactly the spot Reeves predicted. The trap sprang closed with the force of compressed steel and 2 days of spring tension. Both legs caught simultaneously, metal teeth closing on his kneecaps with surgical precision. The sound was distinct, bone cracking, metal clicking, Dozier's scream cutting through the quiet woods like a gunshot. He went down hard, face first into dirt, both legs trapped, pain immediate and overwhelming. His scream echoed, carried across the forest, reached his camp a quarter-mile away. But Reeves didn't move yet. He waited 30 minutes watching from his position, letting the pain do its work, letting Dozier understand that no one was coming, that this was deliberate, that someone had planned this specifically for him. After 30 minutes, Reeves emerged from cover, walked directly to where Dozier lay thrashing and screaming. He was wearing his Marshal badge now, pinned to his vest where everyone could see it. Dozier looked up, saw him, understood immediately. "Just kill me," Dozier said, voice breaking. "Just arrest me. Just kill me." Reeves knelt down, spoke quietly. "You wanted to test the badge. Now you know what it means." Reeves removed the trap carefully, methodically, with enough skill to prevent Dozier from bleeding out, but not enough care to prevent permanent damage. Both kneecaps were shattered, bone fragments visible through torn pants, swelling already starting, the kind of injury frontier medicine couldn't fix properly. Dozier would live, but he'd never walk without a limp, never run, never ride hard again. Reeves wrapped the wounds with strips torn from Dozier's own shirt, tight enough to slow bleeding, loose enough that infection was still possible if he didn't get to a doctor soon. Then Reeves gave him the choice, the part that would become legendary in itself. "You can try to run," Reeves said, standing up, badge catching the morning light. "Or you can turn yourself in. Either way, you'll remember what happened when you disrespected this badge, every step you take for the rest of your life." He left Dozier there in the woods, crippled but conscious, alive but transformed. Walked back to Fort Smith without looking back. The choice was Dozier's now. Try to crawl back to camp and face life as a cripple on the run, or turn himself in and face Judge Parker's court. But either way, the lesson was delivered. The badge wasn't about pride. It was about inevitability. Challenge it, and consequences follow. Not immediate, not hot-blooded, not reactive, but certain, absolute, the way law is supposed to work. Reeves rode back to Fort Smith, knowing every outlaw in the territory would hear this story. They'd hear about the trap, about the choice, about what happens when you test federal authority. And they'd remember that Bass Reeves doesn't just arrest you, he makes sure you understand why. Dozier spent 8 hours crawling a quarter-mile back to camp. His gang found him at sunset, blood-soaked, delirious, both legs mangled. They wanted revenge immediately, wanted to hunt Reeves down, wanted to answer this with violence. But Dozier stopped them. According to the story that spread later, he said something that changed everything. "You don't understand. He could have killed me. He could have arrested me right there. He chose this instead. He wanted me alive, wanted me to remember, wanted me to make a choice." His gang didn't get it at first. Kill or arrest were the only options they understood. But Dozier explained through pain and shock what Reeves had actually done. He demonstrated that the badge operated on a level above simple violence. Killing was easy. Anyone could kill. Arresting was standard. But what Reeves did was different. He'd created permanent consequences, then given Dozier the choice of how to live with them. Try to survive as a crippled outlaw, constantly hunted, or face the law and at least get medical treatment, food, a cell. Death would have been mercy. Arrest would have been expected. This was something else entirely. The gang understood then. They packed their gear that night and rode out separately, abandoning Dozier, wanting no part of whatever game Reeves was playing. Because if Reeves could do this to Dozier, plan it, execute it, walk away, what could he do to them? They scattered across 3 territories within 2 days. And Dozier was left alone with his shattered legs and his choice, understanding for the first time that some people operate on levels most criminals never imagine. 48 hours after the trap sprang, Bob Dozier dragged himself to the Fort Smith courthouse, used a tree branch as a crutch, took him all morning to cover 3 miles, left a blood trail the entire way. He crawled up the courthouse steps on his hands and knees, collapsed in front of the marshal's office, and confessed to both murders. The homesteader and his wife, the land dispute, everything. He begged for prison, begged for a cell, begged for it to be over. Judge Parker heard the case within a week. The evidence was overwhelming. Dozier's confession, 2 witnesses, the murder weapon found at his abandoned camp. Parker sentenced him to hang, standard procedure for double murder in his jurisdiction. But here's the detail that made the story legendary. Dozier thanked him. When Parker announced the sentence, Dozier actually said thank you, because hanging was better than living crippled and hunted, better than spending every day remembering what happened when he tested Bass Reeves's badge. The story spread through Indian Territory faster than any newspaper could print it. Inmates in other prisons heard it. Outlaws hiding in every corner of that 75,000 square mile territory heard it. The lesson was clear. Bass Reeves doesn't just enforce the law, he makes you choose it. He gives you worse than death, then forces you to decide whether you want to face law or face him again. And every criminal hearing that story made the same calculation. Turn yourself in or risk finding out what Reeves's version of justice looks like. The badge became something different after that. Not just a symbol of authority, but a promise of inevitability. Over the following months, something unprecedented happened in Indian Territory. Outlaws started turning themselves in. Not in massive numbers, not a sudden wave, but a steady trickle that Judge Parker's court noticed. Men with warrants would ride into Fort Smith voluntarily, ask for Parker's court, prefer certain conviction over uncertain pursuit. When questioned, they'd reference the same story. What happened to Bob Dozier? What Bass Reeves did instead of making an arrest. Parker noted it in his records. The deterrent effect of Deputy Marshal Reeves's methods extends beyond traditional law enforcement. Reeves continued his career for another 23 years. His final tally, over 3,000 arrests across 32 years of service, 14 men killed in the self-defense, countless others brought in alive. He arrested his own son for murder in 1902, the ultimate demonstration of his commitment to law over personal connection. But after the Dozier incident, something changed in how he operated. According to marshals who worked with him, Reeves never shot another man after that summer of 1884. Didn't need to. His reputation had evolved beyond violence into something more permanent: certainty. Criminals knew that if Bass Reeves was tracking you, you had 2 choices: turn yourself in and face court, or get caught and face whatever Reeves decided you needed to learn. Most chose court. The badge he wore, that silver U.S. Marshal star on leather wallet, became legendary in its own right. People who saw it understood what it represented. Not just federal authority, but a level of justice that operated beyond simple arrest or execution. It meant consequences were coming, one way or another, and you'd be alive to remember them. Bass Reeves retired in 1907 at age 69, his body finally unable to handle the physical demands of tracking fugitives across harsh territory. He spent his final years in Muskogee, Oklahoma, where he'd served as a city policeman for 2 years before his death in 1910. He died at 71, old age for a man who'd lived the life he had, who'd spent decades in the most dangerous work in America. His funeral drew hundreds. Outlaws he'd arrested, judges he'd served, citizens whose lives he'd protected. They buried him with honors, though his story wouldn't become widely known outside of Indian Territory for another century. The badge he wore for 32 years was preserved. It's now in museums, a symbol of early law enforcement, of Black achievement in the post-Civil War West, of what federal authority looked like on the frontier. But the Dozier story became something else. a teaching tale in law enforcement circles. Not officially, not in textbooks, but in the oral tradition Marshals passed down. Authority isn't about force, they'd say. It's about certainty. Bass Reeves proved the badge doesn't need to shoot. It just needs to be inevitable. Bob Dozier was hanged in Fort Smith in 1885, 9 months after his arrest. He spent those months in a cell, unable to walk without assistance. His shattered kneecaps healed wrong, permanent reminders of what happened. Prison records show he told the story to other inmates constantly, not as a boast but as a warning. Don't test the law, he'd say. It doesn't work how you think it works. Some men make you wish you'd never been born. Bass Reeves makes you understand why you shouldn't have challenged him. Today, Bass Reeves is recognized as one of the greatest lawmen in American history. He's been inducted into multiple halls of fame, his story taught in schools, his legacy preserved in museums across Oklahoma. The badge he wore, that silver U.S. Marshal star on leather wallet, is displayed in the Fort Smith National Historic Site, behind glass, labeled with his name and record. Tourists see it daily, learn about his 3,000-plus arrests, his 32 years of service, his legendary tracking skills and master disguises. But the Dozier story isn't on the official plaques. It exists in a different space, in the oral histories of law enforcement, in the legendary accounts passed between people who study frontier justice, in the kind of story that's too complex for museum labels. What happened in those woods wasn't standard police procedure. It wasn't something you could codify in regulations or teach in training academies. It was one man's understanding of what authority actually means, what consequences actually teach, what justice actually requires when you're operating in a place where traditional law barely reaches. The badge represented all of that. Not violence, not pride, not personal revenge, but the certainty that actions have consequences and those consequences will find you. The slap in the saloon wasn't humiliation. It was the beginning of a lesson that changed how outlaws thought about federal authority in Indian Territory. Reeves proved something profound that summer in 1884. The badge doesn't need to draw first, doesn't need to shoot fastest, doesn't need to respond immediately. It just needs to be inevitable, patient, certain, and when it finally moves, you wish it had just shot you instead.